Since very few species other than humanity had the ability to process spatial positioning on the fly, the galaxy had been built up along a standardized axis. Whatever the flat plane that a system's planets rested on would be the plane for that system. Ships would arrange themselves in a two-dimensional flat grid in order to simplify construction, FTL gate positioning, and traffic flow. While humans didn't mind this on most issues, they didn't adhere to it completely because it didn't always work. Most systems that had asteroid belts, for example, had to have special and expensive gravity tethers set up to keep asteroids from wandering into the FTL lanes. In Sol, the humans just built gates to flow up and over the belt, then back down to that standard plane. They figured the cost of keeping the gates in position was a lot less expensive than the special gravity tethers for a whole stretch of asteroids. This general trend for Xenos to behave in space on a flat plane had another effect, however. It made it easy for the human military to surprise them. Not only did Xenos ignore most deep space because they assumed no one was crazy enough to venture out into the abyss willingly, they failed to scan above or below their standard plane. This is why the US supercarrier group Freedom Fist sat above the Crustacan system. Flight crews were refueling gladiators, Marines were prepping their gear just in case, techs were rechecking weapon systems, engines, and every system they could in preparation for battle. Thousands of humans sat in the abyss, waiting for the call, knowing war was nearly upon them. There was a pause as the PA opened up across the fleet. "This is Admiral Winters. Crustacans, fuck it, we've all seen the pictures. The ass-faces have begun attacking UHG colonies. We're told the casualty lists are already in the tens of thousands. The colonies being targeted are entirely civilian, but these ass-faces want to send a message to humanity. They're doing this because an American is defending a Xeno diplomat. That's what we're dealing with here. A species that's used to being a big bad bully and getting what it wants. Now that they're dealing with an American who refuses to surrender to their tyrannical and diabolical demands in the face of his own suffering, they're hoping to scare him into giving up by holding humans hostage. Our government has received no warning about these actions. We were never asked to make our citizens surrender the diplomat. The UHG has not even been informed of the situation by the Xenos. These ass-faces just took it upon themselves to start killing and kidnapping innocent civvies." Crews around the fleet were growling at the news. All the while, bombs were readied, guns were loaded, and shields were checked. "Well, we're gonna show these ugly fuckers that messing with one human means messing with all humans. We all know the policy. America demands revenge by order of magnitude. And these aren't American civvies getting killed, so that means it's twice as bad. So for every one of the UHG civvies gets killed, I want you bastards to kill at least 100 of these ugly ass crabs. They want to bully our friends and try to terrorize humanity without declaring war? We'll show them who they're fucking with." There was a cheer across the fleet at the idea. Weapon systems came online. The fighter bombers began to warm up their engines. Marines marched into their assault ships. Everywhere in the galaxy, calls were going out. The reserves were being called up, and since government service was mandatory for a few years, that meant every able-bodied man and woman in the nation were being called up. Merchant vessels were entering shipyards to get fitted with more weapons. The entirety of the sport racing industry was being refitted to become scouts for the Navy. Space truckers were moving to military depots. If you weren't hauling bullets, bombs, or fuel, you were going to be thrown into combat. America was now at war. Naval elements were scrambling to protect the outer colonies that were now being attacked by the Crustacans. American intel operatives were moving into Xeno territory. UHG diplomats were being informed of everything America knew about the situation. But while the military began to move to defend, it was the job of this supercarrier group to throw the first punch. Crews around the fleet waited for the end of the transmission, and they heard Winters pause in her speech. "We are now at war, and it is our runner to deliver the first strike. We are the Angel of Death, unfurling our wings above our foe. They shall be reduced to nothing more than glass and ashes. Strike hard and strike true. Winter's out." The speech ended, and the feed cut out as the fleet began to move. Everyone was secure at their station. Pilots in their fighter bombers, Marines secure in their crash netting, deckhands clear of the flight deck hangar, techs at their terminals. Then the order was given. The fleet jumped. Everyone had the same strange sensation of blackness, with strange nameless colours at the edge of their vision, and the soft whispers scratching at their brains. 20 minutes later, the fleet returned to real space, the Krostakan planet just below them. On the planet, consoles were screeching in warning. They'd been caught entirely unprepared as the fleet engaged. Gladiators streamed out of the carriers. The Marines' armadillos plummeted towards their targets. Assassin-class ship killers blinked into reality near Krostakan ships, their torpedoes firing the moment they had a firing solution, and the carriers' railguns swiveled as they found targets of opportunity. The Krostakans hadn't been in a real war in centuries, and even then the war against the Libratonians had been almost entirely on the offensive. For the first time in their history, an enemy had suddenly appeared over a major developed world of theirs with the intent of war. Winters hit the launch order on the bridge, and even as the ships, Marines, and fighter bombers all raced to their targets, the carriers unleashed the first strike. Their Liberation-class missiles launched from their firing tubes and rained down upon the planet. In the colony's capital, Krostakans were scurrying around, unsure what to do in the sudden attack. They didn't know how long they had before the enemy arrived, but then they looked up as something gleamed in the sky above them. They had no idea that their city was about to become hotter than the surface of a star, that their bodies would be turned to ash and swept away as the only evidence they ever existed would simply be a black shadow permanently etched into the stone beneath them. They had no idea that the crew of the Enterprise had written on the side of the missile racing towards them, and especially no idea that it said, "Hey, ass crabs, I'll see you in hell. Sincerely, Billy Bob, Space Trucker." Elsewhere in the galaxy, the new war was waging on in a museum. Billy Bob was cornered by the exosuit cops. After smashing that force field generator, they'd come running, and since it hurt to punch metal suits, he was swinging one of the signs as a makeshift club. The tourists had run screaming, as alarms sounded through the museum and people started filing out. There was another threat, however, as Krostakan hunter-killers who'd been waiting at the entrance started to swarm into the place, knocking civilians aside as they pushed through the waves of panicked tourists who were running away from the alarms. The exosuits had some fancy toys in them, as Billy Bob learned when he got shocked by a few who got too close, but he was far hardier than they were expecting. "There's just one of him!" shouted a guard, as the other stayed just past the range of his swinging sign. Water was leaking out of a few suits that had been cracked pretty hard, but Billy Bob had backed up after knocking them down, letting the others pull their wounded comrades out of the way to patch them up and stop the water loss. Even Billy Bob wasn't too keen on murdering museum guards. "Come on then, you evil robots! Keep coming at me!" he encouraged, waving them on. Finally, they charged en masse, swarming over him. He swung the sign to knock two back, but 3 more were on him. Stun rod zapping, as he grunted and growled, slowly pulled to the ground. The Greslins inside their suits were panting, feeling the strain of cornering and fighting the human the last few minutes. But as they sat atop him, he just started laughing. "What's so funny, terrorist? We got you now," said one of the guards, as they worked to hold him down since his strength was still considerable. "What's so funny is this whole time you guys have only been looking at me." "So?" one asked, as Billy Bob laughed once more. Then they heard a heavy thud from behind them. The Greslins turned as fear and dread began to grip them. The Liberatonian exosuit that was on display, the one that had been released from the security shield after the human destroyed the generator, It was moving. They stared up at the towering machine as it walked towards them.
"Please get off my friend."
Emily didn't have to ask twice as they scrambled to get off the human. Billy Bob stood up, dusting himself off with a grin. "Hey, looks like you're the big strong one now. But forgive me if I pass on letting you carry me before I try to cut your throat."
"Oh, shut up."
"Come on, let's go get that golden record and get out." As they turned, another squad of Greslins showed up with more gear. Stun rods, gas guns, riot shields, and stared up at Emily in her power suit. "Don't even think about it," Billy Bob said, as they dropped their riot control weapons on the ground. He chuckled then, and began to walk past as Emily followed along behind him. The Greslins quickly rushed to help their comrades once Emily had stomped past. The power suit's clawed feet were digging tracks into the stone floors with every step.
"This makes me feel amazing. I feel so tall and strong. Also, I really don't know what I'm doing, Billy Bob. I've never used one of these before. There's a bunch of commands I don't understand."
"Have you tried saying help?" There was a pause before her speaker came back on.
"How did you know that would work?"
"Human, Libertonian, whoever. The military is not always the brightest of bright. People are going to need to ask for help." They walked into the exhibit that had the Voyager, and he stopped in front of the glass. He waited for a moment and then looked up at Emily. "Emily, the glass?"
"Oh, right, do I—"
"Just punch it!" One of the upper arms moved up and crashed into the glass, which shattered and fell away. Billy Bob quickly moved forward, climbing up onto the Voyager to find the hatch he was looking for. Opening it up, he retrieved the golden record before walking back to Emily. "Is there a storage hatch in there? Some place to store this?"
There
was a pause as he stood there looking up at the suit.
"Yes,"
she finally said, and crouched down a little as the compartment opened up along the right side of the power suit. He tucked the record into the compartment, noting it had padding to keep it secure, which was good. Then he nodded at the next display and she walked up, punching that one as well. He waited for the glass to finish falling before stepping in to pick up the Luger. It only had 2 magazines, but he took them. The MP-44 had 6 magazines, thankfully, which he tucked into his pockets. This was why he loved pockets. You never knew when you were going to need to carry a bunch of ammo, and you couldn't get your tactical vest. He turned the MP-44 over in his hands, inspecting it for a little. He examined the slide and receiver, pulling it a few times, and then pulled on the trigger. Satisfied, he slapped a magazine into place, loaded it, and aimed at the Nazi pressure suit. It already had a hole in it. What did another matter? He pulled the trigger and smiled as the bullet tore through the head of the pressure suit. Then he looked at the black uniform set up on a mannequin. It looked like it might fit him. Then he shook his head and pulled the iron cross up and off the neck of the uniform, pulling it over his head and tucking it into his shirt. "All right, let's go," he said, as he looked over at Emily, who had been quiet so far.
"I think I've got a better idea how this works. I'm ready, but I don't think the Greslins will bother us again."
"Who? Oh, the fish cops. Yeah, probably not, but you never know, so it pays to be prepared and keep your gun loaded." Even as he said that, they heard the clacking of claws on the stone, as 6 ass faces rounded the corner, guns raised. But then they paused, and looked up at the towering Libertonian power suit. "They mean to steal the display, not destroy it," one hissed out in alarm. But before they could attack or call for help, Emily demonstrated what she'd learned. The power suit shot forward, carving lines in the stone as the claws dragged through it. The upper arms grabbed 2 of the hunter-killers, shredding them in a mist of green goop and shell. The energy weapons on the lower limbs fired at 2 in the back, and then she jumped up, landing and crushing the last 2 beneath those clawed feet. Then the power suit turned and hopped from foot to foot.
"Look how good I am! This is amazing!"
Emily was excited, even as she happened to grind the bodies beneath her into mush, staining the metal legs. Billy Bob stood there, mouth hanging open in surprise. After all this time protecting Emily and fighting creatures, he really was the little guy now. He also wasn't ashamed to admit he was a little aroused at the moment. Then they heard more shouting and clicking of claws. "Touchdown dance later, we need to get out of here," he called out, running past. Glancing around the corner, he saw a squad of ass faces and jumped out, MP44 firing as they cried in surprise. Their energy shields were as useless as the ones the Borks had used. He was just glad the museum had gone through the trouble of perfectly persevering the centuries-old ammunition in its original form. The squad was pulped, dead and bleeding that green gunk all over the white floors, as Billy Bob quickly reloaded. Turning, he nodded at Emily, jogging past her power suit as he began to check around corners. He saw another squad charging down their way, noting one of them had a large tube hoisted over his shoulder. That was an anti-tank gun if he ever saw one.
"I got this one, Billy Bob," he heard, and looked up as Emily charged past.
"Emily, wait!" he called out. But she was around the corner. Unlike the surprise squad from before, these were aware something big was out there. They raised their weapons as she rounded the corner, and their targeting computers didn't struggle much getting a firing solution on a target rushing straight at them. Her power suit was pelted with those pink bolts, a blue shield flashing as it absorbed the blows. But then, the one holding the tube fired, and a green cylinder slammed into her suit's chest. She staggered, but was upon them, claws flashing as she tore them to shreds. He shook his head as he jogged to catch up. She understood swooping and clawing, but not ranged combat. He knew that thing had to have a targeting computer, but she wasn't thinking like that yet.
That hurt,"
she groaned over the speaker. "Okay, let me give you a quick pointer. Don't just run straight at the fucker with an anti-tank gun."
"But I watched you avoid all that fire back in the station, and I can move way faster."
"Yeah, I rolled, ducked, dove, and weaved. Serpentine, you gotta move around. Straight lines are not hard to predict, especially when you charge straight at them." Billy Bob was shaking his head. "Here, wait for a second." They had another corridor before they'd be out in one of those gardens. He glanced around a corner and saw a stationary squad with two of those tubes waiting for them. Dropping down, he pressed his back to the wall, shifting a little to get ready, and quickly leaned around the corner, bracing on one knee. 2 shots at the first, 2 shots at the second, then back around the corner. Go! Emily charged as the crabs tried to scramble and pick up the tubes, but she was on them too quick. Their standard rifles didn't phase the shield in the least.
"Was that better?"
"Much!" Billy Bob said, as he jogged out to catch up with her. But they were about to be out of the corridors. He thought over the layout of the museum in his head. "Alright, outside is the garden section. We can either cut straight across and through more corridors, or fire through the gardens and back up to that private dock." He glanced around a corner and then quickly tucked back. Fuck! There had been half a dozen squads out there. 3 were out in the gardens. 3 had been up on bridges and balconies around the area. He had 4 full magazines and his current mostly full one, but with the various ranges and covers, he wasn't sure how many he could get. And that was the squads he could see. No telling if there were more. He laid out the situation for Emily and shook his head. Not sure what to do here.
"Billy Bob, the wings on this suit aren't for show, you know."
He looked back up at that. "What do you mean?"
"I'll charge, duck and dodge and weave and all that. You get the ones with the matter slammers."
"Is that what you guys call them? Not bad." Then he shrugged. "Well, this is as good a way to die as any. Are the speakers on that thing easy to control?"
"Yes. Why?"
"Can you give my implant access?"
Hold on."
He waited a few seconds before she said,
"Okay, go."
Nodding, he scrolled through his implant and smiled as he selected Song 2 on repeat. "Alright, make it good." He took a few breaths, glanced out once more and then leaned out, firing to get their attention and kill one of the tube holders. They started to train their weapons on him when Emily rushed out of the corridor just in time for Woohoo! Then she leaped, and small boosters launched the suit forward into a squad, which she shredded. He figured no one would focus on him after that. He ran forward, popping off shots at the tube holders when he could. They fired at her and from time to time got a lock with those tubes, but when they shot out she was dropping away, or jumping in a different direction. She had seen Billy Bob in action and understood what he meant now. Keep moving, jump, charge, dash. She'd fly up into the air, swoop in and stomp on a squad, or charge at them only to leap to the side and hit a different squad. All the while that music blared out through the gardens. Billy Bob grinned as he watched her work, but he got careless. He was standing in the open when he got slammed from the side. 3 of those pink bolts hitting his right side and his shoulder. He gasped and cursed, feeling the sting, and seeing the burn marks. He ducked down behind a stone planter box and rubbed his side with a curse. Breathing hurt, his ribs twinged, and as he shifted his shoulder he groaned in pain. So he shifted the MP-44 and rose up, firing from the left side to kill the ass crap who'd shot him from a balcony. He got up and limped along then, taking a long burst at the last squad to keep their heads down. Then Emily dropped on them, as green gunk flew in every direction. He was down to 2 magazines left, and reloading was a bit more difficult. But no one else was trying to kill them, it seemed. The power suit jumped off the balcony it was on, dropping to the gardens with a thud, cracking the stone under its clawed feet.
"We did great, Billy Bob,"
she said, as she turned the music off. "Yeah, I'm real proud of you, Emily. You kick ass like a pro." He groaned a little as he looked around at the splattered remains of the ass faces. He hurt, and he wasn't sure if he had internal bleeding, but he was a hell of a lot better off than them. Emily didn't notice, and he didn't plan on telling her. "Hey, is there some art you want to take with us?"
"What? We should get out of here."
"Why?" He waved a hand. "They're all dead."
"I'm positive there are more,"
she said, and he nodded a little at that. "Yeah, but they don't seem to be rushing to get us now that we've thinned them out. Do you want to go back and shred those paintings about the war?" The power suit turned back the way they'd come from.
"I could, couldn't I?"
"Yeah, or we could go pick out a painting you really like and take it with us." There was a pause for a moment.
"Do you remember that painting with the sunset, over that mountain, where the double moon was in the top corner?"
"Yeah, with that fart cloud over the trees."
"It's not a fart cloud. That's actually from my home planet. It's one of the few Libertonian paintings here. I didn't want to mention it earlier in case someone overheard. I want to take that with us."
"Sure, you go shred the paintings. I'll go meet you at that one."
"Okay, I'll meet you there."
The power suit charged off down the way they'd come from, and once she was out of sight, Billy Bob groaned and began to limp towards the painting she had mentioned. His side hurt and made him wince, but he could keep moving all right. He got to the gallery, now completely empty, and sat down heavily on a bench near the painting in question. He looked up at the one she had mentioned. It was rather nice. Some sort of valley in front of a mountain, purple-red river weaving between some short-looking trees, with what he had called a green fart cloud hanging over them. It was sunset, birds flying through the sky just above the green cloud. In the top corner, just over the mountain, was a double moon and night sky. So that was Libertonian Earth. Didn't look bad aside from the fart cloud. Soon the power suit came clomping down the hall. He stood up and waved as she got close. "Good pick there, Emily. Like the frame?"
"Yeah, it looks good."
He nodded and slung the MP-44 over his shoulder and pulled the painting off the wall. It was a good 6x6 painting, but in the lower gravity he could carry it just fine. "Why don't you sweep around real quick and then meet me out in that flower garden, the one with that nice fountain? Make sure no other ass faces are closing in on us. I'll see you there."
"Sounds good," she said,
turning and rushing off again. Once more, Billy Bob waited until she was out of sight and groaned out. He hauled the painting along, struggling a bit with the last size even if it didn't weigh very much. Soon he was outside in the gardens, and forced himself to not limp as he carried the painting out to the flower garden he had mentioned. Reds, blues, purples, all sorts of different colours were arranged around a fountain of dancing water, her power suit standing in the open. The place was empty, and it all looked rather gorgeous, even the claw marks her suit left in the stone. He smiled as he approached, wobbling a little in the wind as the painting acted as a big sail, but the wind wasn't that strong with the light gravity. Still in the clear?
Yeah, I don't see anyone else. This is exhilarating, Billy Bob. I feel so incredibly powerful. This suit is amazing.
Yeah, you were something special stomping and shredding like that. I think I'll let you do all the fighting from now on.
I couldn't have survived without you. You kept them down, shot those matter slammers. It was incredible.
Let me just take a moment of rest. All this fighting was a little draining today. I didn't get all amped up like before.
Oh, okay.
He leaned the painting against a bench and then sat on a free one, looking around at the flowers as they swayed lightly in the breeze. His side really hurt, especially because breathing hurt, but he just smiled up at Emily. I guess you were right. This museum wasn't half bad now, was it? Kinda crazy about that war, though. I wonder what they did to make us attack. Emily was quiet for a moment as he looked up at her. Then he frowned. What do you know?
It's us. I told you, I was on my way to the capital to destroy the galaxy as we know it.
What? We're destroying the galaxy?
Sorry, maybe a translator error? We're going to change it. I have proved the Council has been suppressing the ambition and intelligence of some species with a special device. I wanted to unveil it at the Council meeting and tear the government apart.
Oh, when did you say that?
I talked about it some just after we first left that refueling station when we first met. Why do you think I was being hunted by hunter-killers?
He paused, trying to think back that far. He remembered thinking how awesome it was she was a space eagle, although now she was a space eagle raptor. Also, to be perfectly honest, he went a little blind after being offered several billion credits. You know, I never really asked. I thought they were bandits or something. Hey, yeah, are they a council race? Are they like cops or something?
They're the secret police.
Oh, the secret police. Fuck them then. They're really suppressing races?
Yes, through the FTL lanes and translator implants.
I feel fine.
You're a brand new species. It takes time to figure out how to calibrate the devices to tailor each species and tone down their ambitions and intellect. Keeps them easy to control. This is the sort of thing we wanted to prevent when we originally formed the council.
We just call it basic TV.
What?
Nothing. He sighed and got up, then, unable to suppress a groan that Emily noticed.
Wait, are you hurt?
Nah, I'm fine. Don't worry about it. Just a scratch.
Billy Bob?
I'll be fine. Let's get to the ship. He picked up the painting again, but this time Emily wasn't ready to rush off. He limped along with the painting, dragging along his side now, as they approached the private dock in the back of the museum. But as they approached, neither one had been paying enough attention. Ass faces burst from behind the other ships that were still sitting on the ground, and a giant metal crab power suit skittered out from behind his longhorn. Billy Bob quickly dropped the painting and pulled up his MP-44, but they were out in the open, dead to rights, with 5 hunter-killers and that metal crab around them.
Surrender! We have you surrounded!
Came a voice from the metal crab. Fuck! Billy Bob muttered as he looked around. But then the metal crab seemed to shift.
He's where?
Came out over the speaker.
I'll kill you, human!
A voice screeched from behind them. Billy Bob turned and saw an ass face, with 2 eyes stitched shut and some scars on his face.
I, Captain Assface, will have my revenge!
Oh, hey, you're the guy from before.
Wait, you two have the same name?
Emily said from beside him. Everyone paused at that, and Billy Bob frowned, quickly undoing some of his translator options.
What?
My name is Billy Bob, not some filthy human name. It's pronounced Billy Bob, the trucker said. There was an awkward moment as they stared at each other, and then Billy Bob screamed, "You can't have my name! Die, die, die!" Rushing forward, he began to fire wildly, his targeting computer unable to lock onto a target as he ran forward and his two eyes struggled to figure out his depth. The ass faces scattered back behind their ships as Emily dashed to the side and Billy Bob ran the other way, diving behind a ship as well. An ass face was behind it, and Billy Bob cursed before pulling up his MP44 and blasting it quickly. Groaning, he pushed himself to his feet, trying to run around the ship, only to run into another of the hunter killers. Up close, it dropped the energy rifle and tried to snap his face off with those claws, but Billy Bob jumped back, then swung his MP44 to smash it in the face. As it dropped, he fired wildly at the third hunter killer behind one ship over. Then he was knocked to the ground, as Captain Assface rounded the corner and slammed him down. The MP44 went flying, and Billy Bob looked up at the pissed-off Assface above him. It snapped down with its claws, as he twisted and turned to avoid the strikes. Emily was having some sort of close combat brawl with the metal crab. He could hear the sounds of smashing metal on metal, so he didn't think she could help. He pulled the Luger free with his left hand, since his right really hurt for some reason, and cried out as Captain Assface finally got it right and stepped on him, a sharp appendage piercing through Billy Bob's stomach as he gasped and grunted. "I've got you now," it hissed, just before Billy Bob pulled the trigger on his Luger and blew a neat hole through Captain Assface's face. The Xeno collapsed on top of him, knocking his Luger aside as he groaned. Tilting his head, he could see the world upside down, as the metal crab had pinned Emily in her power suit. He could see large pincers in the air, moving down, slowly pushing back the arms of her suit. Billy Bob groaned and rolled over a bit, still pinned to the ground by that sharp leg piercing his gut. He reached with his left hand since his right still hurt, and then grabbed his Luger. Things were blurry, but he aimed at the metal crab and fired everything he had left in the gun. Ping, 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 plunk, plunk, plunk. The crab sagged, goop leaking out of 3 holes that had been shot in the side. Emily shoved it off then, and her power suit rose up. Billy Bob was breathing hard. Everything was pretty blurry. She quickly moved over, tossing the body off of him, putting the leg out of his stomach as he groaned in pain. Then he slowly pushed down with his left and stood up. He was wobbly, but he was still standing. "Alright, we won! Fuck these guys! High five!" He shifted his right arm up while holstering the Luger with his left, hoping she'd be gentle in her power suit. "Billy Bob!" "What?" He frowned then, as he slowly looked over, eyes wandering down his right shoulder, to his elbow, and... He wiggled his elbow, looking around for the rest of his arm. "Oh shit! Oh fuck! Jesus!" He walked past and found his right forearm, where he'd been knocked down. That's why it had hurt so much. He walked over, stumbling a bit as he kicked his forearm. Shit! He stumbled a bit more before managing to pick it up in his left hand.
"Billy Bob, stay there. I'll go get the biogel."
There was a hiss as she opened her power suit and climbed out. But he was staring at his hand being held in his other hand. He felt tired. Turning, he sat down on the corpse of Captain Assface. His eyes were heavy. He heard Emily screaming something about being there in a hurry. Don't worry. I hope your painting is okay. I'm just going to take a nap." His breathing slowed as he blinked heavily, still holding his right hand with his left. His eyes closed. And so ends another chapter in the adventures of Billy Bob, Space Trucker.